The morning I asked for a raise, the office carried an unusual stillness, the kind that settles before a storm. After 6 years of discipline and deadlines, I approached the CTO with a quiet confidence, shaped by results, late nights, and a product that kept the company alive. I carried a folder filled with facts, not hopes, certain that numbers would speak clearly. Inside his glass office, he listened without listening. He scanned the figures with the impatience of someone reading a menu they had already memorized. When he laughed, it was sharp and careless, a sound that suggested my request was a form of entertainment. It echoed against the glass like a reminder of my place. He thanked me for my effort, told me leadership carried the real weight, and dismissed me with a simple wave toward the door. I walked out without bending. In the corridor, a few colleagues paused, expecting anger or raised voices. I offered none. I sat at my desk, opened a folder I kept encrypted for years, and looked at the earliest blueprint of a system that built their reputation. Every component, every logic path, every signature was documented with precision long before the company claimed ownership of anything. The realization settled slowly. They had mistaken my calm for surrender, my silence for acceptance, and my loyalty for dependence. That evening, I reviewed each document and verified each timestamp. Nothing was accidental. Everything was recorded. When I closed the folder, a single thought crystallized. If the company believed my work belonged to them, they had forgotten that creation carries its own authority. The next move would not be emotional. It would be strategic. During those 6 years, the company praised collaboration, yet every critical moment led straight to my desk. When a major client demanded a flawless demonstration before a board review, it was my phone that vibrated long after the building emptied. When the data pipeline froze on national holidays, the emergency calls reached me while the leadership team enjoyed their time away. I carried the pressure quietly, solving problems before anyone else understood their scale. The system grew into something larger than the company realized. I built it with patience, layer by layer, shaping each part with the same care older professionals use when constructing a tool meant to last. The engine could withstand traffic spikes and internal errors without drawing attention to itself. It simply worked, and people began to treat its reliability as an unchanging fact. Over time, a strange culture formed around it. New employees spoke about the code as if it had appeared overnight, a mysterious gift from early founders. My authorship faded into corporate folklore, even as teams depended on the structure I had created. Titles around me changed, slides filled rooms, and committees multiplied, yet my position stayed frozen, as if my contribution had reached a limit no one wanted to acknowledge. I continued recording everything. Notebooks filled with revisions. Repositories preserved with care. Encrypted archives kept safe with verifiable dates. These habits came from experience, not resentment. You learn that valuable work often becomes the quiet target of ownership claims. One afternoon, a legal update appeared in my inbox. A reminder about intellectual property obligations, written in pleasant language that did not hide its intent. The timing revealed their concern, but their concern revealed something else. They were preparing.
So was I.
In the weeks following that laugh, the CTO's behavior shifted in small but unmistakable ways. He no longer spoke to me directly unless something was failing. Tasks arrived through assistants with instructions to handle them immediately, as if my time no longer belonged to me. Weekend deployment plans began appearing on my calendar without a single conversation. It felt less like leadership and more like ownership, as though my silence had granted him permission to treat me as company property. The turning point arrived during a visit from a new vice president. This was the kind of tour where each department displayed its best work. When we reached my corner of the floor, the CTO introduced me with a single sentence that rewrote history. He said I maintained the legacy system. He presented me as a caretaker of something old rather than the mind behind its creation. The vice president nodded politely and moved on, unaware of what had been erased. I left the office that evening with a quiet clarity. I contacted an independent patent attorney and walked them through the entire development timeline. Early diagrams, prototype notes, The night spent building the architecture before the company even understood what it needed. The attorney listened carefully and asked one question that settled every doubt. Had I surrendered ownership before the invention existed, or after it had already proven its value? The answer was simple. The proof lived in my files. The next week, I requested my complete HR record and every review that praised the system. To the company, it looked like I was healing from an embarrassing moment. In truth, I had already begun the next phase. The patent process unfolded quietly, almost like a private investigation. I gathered every drawing, every dated sketch, and every early version stored on my personal equipment. The attorney translated my work into formal claims and precise descriptions that could withstand scrutiny. Each document created a record stronger than pride or memory, and the foundation grew until it resembled a map of the entire system's origin. While the application advanced through its stages, I continued my routine with steady discipline. I attended planning meetings, resolved performance issues, and handled emergency calls with the same reliability that had defined my role for years. Normal behavior became a shield. It kept suspicion low and allowed their confidence to rise unchecked. The moment the status changed from pending to published, the atmosphere shifted. A published patent invites attention, and attention invites questions from people who prefer the comfort of assumptions. Within days, I received an unexpected meeting request from the CTO. The tone appeared casual, yet the list of attendees revealed concern. Inside the room, legal representatives asked for explanations about core functions of the system. Their questions moved slowly, as if they were trying to trace ownership line by line. I answered politely, offering clarity without surrendering expertise. Professionalism can be a boundary when used with intention. After the meeting, HR approached me with an offer that carried conditions rather than appreciation. It promised benefits in exchange for tighter control over my work. I declined with the same calm I carried into the patent office. Later that evening, a message arrived from a competing firm. They referenced the published patent and asked for a conversation. They wanted business, not excuses. The meeting with the rival company took place in a quiet conference room far from both headquarters. There were no dramatic presentations or exaggerated promises, only a team that approached the discussion with the seriousness of people who recognized genuine value. They studied my diagrams, asked for clarification where needed, and took notes with the focus of engineers who knew exactly why they were in the room. From the beginning, the tone was respectful, and that alone set this conversation apart from years of internal politics. Their questions were direct. They wanted to know how the architecture handled sudden spikes, how the system repaired itself under pressure, and what safeguards existed against data corruption. I answered with the confidence of someone who had lived inside the engine. Every reply strengthened the negotiation, not by force, but by the simple weight of truth. They saw the craftsmanship and they understood its potential. When the discussion turned to terms, I insisted on more than compensation. I wanted long-term licensing, protection against corporate retaliation, and a full review validating the history of the invention. Their legal team examined every document, every timestamp, every early draft. When they confirmed the origin of the work, the atmosphere shifted. Recognition became visible, and respect settled into the room like a final signature. I signed the agreement early on a Tuesday. That afternoon, I returned to my desk with quiet composure. No celebration, no announcement. I simply resumed my work routine. 2 weeks later, the rival company revealed a major partnership involving the patent. My company studied the announcement carefully, and realization spread through leadership. The CTO summoned me without confidence in his voice. The consequences appeared almost immediately. Legal teams began scheduling back-to-back meetings, each one filled with uneasy faces and hurried notes. Messages that once took days to reach me now arrived within minutes. Assistants delivered requests from the CTO with an unusual politeness, as if a change in tone could erase years of dismissal. The building carried a tension that settled into every corner, and even casual conversations stopped mid-sentence when someone mentioned the patent. The next wave came from outside the company. Long-term clients requested explanations about new features being promoted by the rival. Investors demanded reports and escalated calls to the board. Meetings that had once celebrated projected growth shifted into slow, uncomfortable reviews of ownership, documentation, and risk. The CTO attempted to create confusion by blaming outdated policies and ambiguous contracts, but each attempt collapsed when confronted with the dates and records attached to the original work. My attorney responded to their concerns with a single letter. It presented the timeline clearly and reminded them that any false claims would carry consequences. After that, communication from leadership softened. Careful language replaced confidence, and deliberate silence replaced accusations. Within weeks, the company announced a major reorganization. Entire teams were reassigned or dissolved. Projects stalled. Hiring froze. Managers who once praised innovation now pleaded with engineers to remain patient. The pressure on executive leadership became visible, especially on the CTO, who appeared thinner and less certain every time he walked through the office. I observed all of it from a calm distance, not out of satisfaction, but out of clarity. Creation carries its own momentum, and proof carries its own authority. His final request for a private meeting remained unanswered. Once the public excitement settled, the real consequences emerged behind closed doors. The company attempted to project stability, yet the atmosphere carried a heaviness that lingered in every meeting. Conversations became cautious, and people who once spoke freely now measured each word. The leadership team tried to maintain confidence, but the loss of technological advantage created questions they could no longer postpone. Inside the building, the reactions varied. Some managers suddenly remembered moments when they claimed to support my work, as if rewritten memories could repair years of silence. Others avoided crossing my path, aware that their earlier indifference now carried a cost. A few approached quietly, expressing relief that someone had finally challenged the complacency that had grown under the CTO's leadership. Their gratitude was subdued, shaped by the understanding that the company had ignored warning signs for too long. The board initiated a full internal review. They requested archived communication, development records, and approval logs. Departments spent long hours gathering evidence, unaware that the most damaging information had existed in their files for years. Paper trails revealed truths that people try to bury, and these documents painted a clear timeline of ownership and oversight. The CTO made several attempts to retain influence. He suggested purchasing the rights, offered external advisory roles, and presented compensation packages designed to rebuild trust. These gestures arrived too late. The issue was no longer financial. It was structural, and I refused to compromise what had already been established. His removal happened quietly, through a transition statement crafted to protect reputations. When I resigned soon after, my letter was brief. I left without conflict, stepping into a position that acknowledged the value I had always delivered. A junior engineer asked how I remained composed. Calm, I told him, is simply disciplined clarity. If you are past 50, you already understand how quickly the world rewards volume. You have seen people advance simply because they filled rooms with certainty rather than substance. You have watched careers rise on confidence alone, only to collapse the moment real responsibility demanded proof. Experience gives you a different lens. You know how to read a situation without raising your voice. You recognize when enthusiasm is genuine and when it is being used to disguise uncertainty. Your strength lies in the patterns you have learned to recognize. You can sense when respect is offered sincerely and when it is offered to buy time. You notice when someone tries to diminish your contribution with jokes or casual remarks. You also know that silence can be a choice, not a surrender. Patience used deliberately becomes a tool capable of shaping outcomes more effectively than confrontation. Protect your work by treating it with structure. Keep records that speak clearly even when others remain silent. Define ownership early and revisit it whenever the environment shifts. These habits do not make you difficult. They make you dependable in a world that often confuses speed with wisdom. When someone attempts to control your access or your influence, remember that doors are not the only entry points. Position yourself where evidence carries more weight than opinions. Move with intention rather than impulse. Let your decisions be guided by clarity rather than emotion. And when the moment finally arrives to assert what you have built, Move without drama. Allow the facts to do the work that voices often fail to accomplish. People who confuse authority with access eventually lock themselves out.